206.
Mic check, mic check.
Salutations.
1 1 1 2 1 2.
What's up, world? And welcome to another episode of the 206. As promised, we are finally delivering on the spirituality and religion episode.
All right.
If you guys are listening to this right now, it means that it finally worked. And there is no other choice. Either you're listening to it or you're not, because if we encountered more technical difficulties, then you won't hear this and you'll never see a religion episode. But you're listening to me right now. Hopefully, I'm putting it out there in the universe, and we're finally going to talk about it. So yeah, it's pretty simple. We're just going to talk about that's what it was. The reason why we thought it was a good idea to finally do this episode is because we reference the Baha'i faith a lot in a lot of our videos, or I guess technically they're not videos because this is a podcast, but you get my point. And we thought that it'll be great to do this episode because while this is not exclusively a conversation about the Baha'i faith, because both me and Jason are Baha'is and Tim is extremely familiar with the Baha'i faith, you'll come to understand, hopefully, at least some of the basics in regard to the religion. And at the end of this episode, if you still feel like you don't have a good grasp on what the religion is about, I'll leave a link in the description for you to go and check it out. And also, I know in future videos, we might do a series. We might do a series on the Baha'i faith and go throughout the history of it and talk about different principles. So with that being said, I go ahead and pass the rock over to Tim, who can get us started on today's episode.
Yo, what's up, peoples? Big Tim from the Sunshine State. Not so sunny during these hard times, during these pandemic times, but still rolling as strong as we can. I want to extend my love, perseverance, and strength to everyone in the world, and to stay steadfast and try to incorporate as much patience and appreciation for the simple things in life as much as possible. Nearly every time in humanity's existence had such massive challenges and tests has been thrown at us, and not once had it completely just, cleared us out. We survive, we stand up, and we keep moving. So 206 extends its love out and prayers to everyone that's still with us and those that are lost. But yes, today talk about spiritual journeys, and hopefully give you a little bit of insight too into the Baha'i faith, because we use a lot of references in a lot of our episodes. But I'll start off by sharing a little bit about my background. My family is a lot of United Methodists and Baptist background in my family. My great grandfather was a Baptist minister. My grandmother and mom are very strong Christian women. My grandmother has us say the Lord's Prayer every night before we go to bed. We say grace before dinner. This entire year, my grandmother dresses up as if she's going, out somewhere, driving to some church. She sits down in the dining room on the computer and attends a live sermon across YouTube, I believe. So that's just a sneak peek into her devoutness. And when I was little, mom used to sing gospel songs like he's got the whole world in his hands, or this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I was definitely raised heavily caked, lots of spiritual syrup in my childhood. And then by the time I hit early 20s, graduated from high school in 2007, through my friends, I've got to participate in a whole bunch of spiritual activities and gatherings as it relates to their faith. And through that experience, had learned so much about what true fellowship means, and have developed bonds that will last a lifetime. There's not a moment where I don't think about how profound of a role my spiritual experiences have been. Romances, employment, occupations, Um, just so much through my spiritual journey that I experienced of life that it's mind-boggling. It's truly staggering just to think of where that journey has brought me in regards to experiences and a lot of growth and realizations in life. And I'm very, very, very grateful. Um, so yeah, I think another medium on my spiritual journey lies in a lot of the books and video games I played growing up. Played a lot of games, and in a lot of these games, there's a lot of storytelling going on, a lot of immersed dialogue that you get to be a part of in a lot of these video games, and they have a lot of you know lessons like morality, fairness, charity, and justice. And I have to say that a lot of the spiritual virtues, I've learned from, you know, the Bible or the Baha'i writings definitely coincided and resonated with a lot of gems that I've siphoned and taken away from a lot of the entertainment that I've been involved with throughout my life as well. So, yeah, yeah, it's very interesting, and I guess in a nutshell, that's just a little bit of what my spiritual journey has been like. And pretty interesting.
No doubt. Appreciate you sharing. So I guess I'll go ahead and jump into the pool and give my experience. My experience, I would say, is definitely more of an intellectual journey than anything else. And I think that for me, it was so because at the time where I began to think about concepts such as God and religion and spirituality, I was at a time where I was starting to develop my intellectual capacities anyway. And for me, although a lot of people say religion is about faith and it's about how you personally connect to God and your concept of spirituality, to me it's also it to me I thought at the outset that it should be an intellectual thing. Like from the beginning I'm like, if I am going to believe in something that's all encompassing, such as religion and the concept of God, it should have to make sense and not make sense to me. Because I think oftentimes that's what we do whenever we think about things like we think about these large scale ideologies like religion or politics. We kind of put ourselves at the center and we say, hey, if this doesn't makes sense to me from the sense of not that I'm trying to objectively search after truth, but if it infringes upon my sensibilities in some type of way or it makes me feel uncomfortable, then it's not true or I don't believe in it. But for me, it's like if I'm going to be thinking about what religion makes sense to me, I'm gonna have to kind of take myself and my sensibilities out of it because who am I? I'm just one random little kid in the world full of 7 billion people on a rock floating through space. So I'm not gonna put myself in the center. So I try to really take myself out of the process and think about the world in its entirety and think about religion making sense in that context. So before I get into some of the things about the Baha'i faith that I started to investigate, because again, that's the religion that I grew up in, I'm going to preface that story with another one, and that Tim mentioned video games playing a large role in his religious and spiritual journey. And there's one video game in particular that played a huge role in my own growth and development in regard to religion. And that's this game called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. Now, as a young kid, there's very few things I actually like to do. Actually, I like to do a lot of things, but there were two things in particular that I like to do more than anything else. That was play sports and play video games. 85, 90, 95% of my time was doing one of those two things. So I remember how old was I when I first played the Old Republic? I was 11 or 12. I believe 12, maybe 11, but I believe 12. Tim, co-host of the 206, and my brother Manuel were obsessed. And when I mean obsessed, they were like worse than cats on catnip. They were obsessed with this game called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. every single time I saw my brother, he was on the phone talking to Tim for hours and hours and hours at a time about
Yo,
this stupid game.
you'd have to have a satellite to find us.
Oh my god! So I remember there was one day I was outside playing football, and I remember like I want to go ahead and run inside the house and beat my brother to the system, so we didn't have to fight over it when we both got in. So I checked out early. I got inside, and I was gonna play my sports game because when I first started playing video games heavily, I really only cared about sports games. I didn't care about too much of anything. Oh my god, I'm such an idiot. Sorry, I have to backtrack because my OCD is gonna make me do this. There was three things I primarily like to do: sports, video games, and read. Okay, so anyways, I just had to throw that in there because I don't know how I left reading out. Anyways, so when I came back in, uh, I wanted to beat my brother to the system, so we didn't have to fight over it. And yeah, I was only playing sports games when I first started playing video games. I'd only play sports games, so I was looking for some football game. I don't remember which one it was. I think was there 2K back then on the Xbox? Maybe I remember there was 2K on the Sega Dreamcast, but I don't know if I was playing Madden
Definitely
or
on
a
the
2K game.
Dreamcast. I'm sure they
Yeah,
had it came with the Xbox. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm trying to. Anyways, I'm not gonna get sidetracked. I was playing a football game, either a 2K game or Madden, right? And I couldn't find it. I was looking all over the room, under my bed, on top of my bed, underneath the sheets, behind the desk. Nothing. I couldn't find this junk, right? But when I opened up the system, what do you think was there? Of course, it was that stupid Star Wars games that I couldn't care less about. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want to go back outside. I came in here to play the Xbox. Let me just play it and see what the big fuss is all about. They're on the phone talking about this junk nonstop. Let me see if there's anything to this game. So I start the game up, and the opening scene of the game, your main character is like on a spaceship, and technically the game kind of starts before that, where you customize your character in the beginning because it's a RPG, and RPG games you always like set up your character before you actually start playing. And the only thing I really paid attention to, because this was all so unfamiliar to me because I had never played an RPG and it didn't make any sense to me, I just made my character black because I was black and I didn't really pay too much attention to anything else. So fast forward to the cutscene, my character is like tossing and turning in his sleep. You can see the screen shaking. You're out in deep space, so you get the idea that okay, the ship might blow up or whatever, the spaceship might blow up or whatever, and you probably gonna have to get off of it. Sure enough, 2 seconds later, another character comes running in and says, "Hey, you gotta wake up! This thing's about to blow or whatever." So your character gets up, or my character gets up, and he looks him in the face, and then there's a long silence and there's a long pause. So I'm sitting here waiting for the game to continue, and nothing's happening. So I'm like, are you serious? They're sitting here making a big fuss about this stupid game and it's broken. It doesn't even work. Like, I'm about to just turn this off and go back outside since I can't find my football game. But then as I look closer on the TV screen, I see there's a bunch of dialogue. I'm like, what is that? Why is there a bunch of words on the screen? And then I look closer. I'm like, oh, it makes sense. I saw that all the dialogue on the screen were responses to what the guy had said. And it was very clear at that point that I get to choose what I say in response to this character. So I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I didn't even read what the responses said. I'm like, I just thought it was cool that I get to choose what I want to say. So automatically my interest is already peaked. And at this point, it's probably when I fell in love with the game. I'm like, wow, I have agency in this game. This is kind of cool. So, I mean, I looked at the responses and it's like, you can be a jackass. You can be kind of mysterious. You can be practical and to the point. So, of course, I chose the jackass option. And then he responded, and then you get to respond back. So then quickly I realized that, okay, this is not just a one-off. For the entirety of this game, most likely, I'm going to be able to choose what I say. So as I continue to play the game, I realized that, this wasn't here for any superficial or trivial reason. It was actually important. Everything that you said had an effect on not only your character, but the companions around you in the video game, and also other people that you met throughout the duration of the game. And everything you said had an effect on, again, those around you and your environment. So it kind of started to teach me at an early age, like, okay, like what you say has consequences. You can't just say whatever you want to say in any given moment and think that it's going to be okay. You have to really consciously think about your words, the power that they have, and the effect they're going to have on those around you and the environment around you. So like that was pretty significant for me as an 11, 12-year-old kid, when you're at that time where you're young, your mind's malleable, you're really starting to challenge things for the first time. You don't blindly accept things to be true. Because let's think about if you're 6, 7, 8 years old, and let's say you're 7 and 6, or 6. Let's use 6. Let's say you're 6 or 7. Okay, why can't I make up my mind? Let's say 7. Let's say you're 7 years old, and an authority figure, let's say your older brother, your older sister, or teacher says, "Hey, Armand, all cars are made in Australia, I'm probably just going to believe them because I don't really have any way to independently think about that information. I'm like, okay, my teacher told me, my brother told me, my mom told me, it must be true, right? But when you're 11, 12, you're not just going to be like, oh, yeah, that's true. You're like, no, you first filter it through your brain and you're like, I don't really think that's true. That doesn't make sense, right? Or you at least start to like question it. It doesn't sit right with you. You don't just blindly accept it. So I feel like that's a critical age in your life because you're being bombarded with all this information and you're also learning to independently think for the first time. I think it's a very critical juncture, and how you go about developing the way you think, I think lays the foundation for how you'll continue to think throughout the rest of your life. So I was very grateful, primarily in retrospect, because in the beginning it was just all kind of cool to me. But I was grateful that I had this game here to teach me about actions and consequences and the power of your words. And then also the game itself explored pretty deep themes at Star Wars, so you understand the concept of like light side, dark side. And there are certain choices that you also got to make in the game, much like the dialogue options where the game didn't choose for you. You get to choose, okay, am I gonna trust this guy and bring him like alongside my companions, or I'm gonna like, let's say, leave him to die. Am I gonna be nice to this person, or mean to this person? There's a bunch of options you have to choose in the game that also had an effect on the outcome of the game. So again, I'm learning a lot about cause and effect, as you can see, both through the words that I use, but also the actions that I take. So I think that it really helped me. It really helped me think on more of a critical level. And I think that was very important for me as I then began to investigate the Baha'i faith. And that's where we transition into my own religious and spiritual journey, mainly from an ideological perspective. Because yeah, I think regardless of whatever religious background you have, you're gonna have stories about going to different religious holidays, going to church, going to the temple, going to the mosque. If you're Baha'i, going to the Baha'i Center and going to feasts. But so those are all kind of universal that we can all relate to. But something that's particular to me is the way I approach religion, and the way it kind of started to make sense for me, and I navigated that reality in my mind. So that's why I want to share that with you. So I guess I started when I really started to investigate the writings of the Baha'i faith and started to just, ask my mom questions, talk to my siblings about it, talk to other Baha'is. Really, before I started to do all that, when I kind of made the conscious choice, I was going to see, like, okay, what is this religion that I grew up in and does it make sense? I started to ask myself, okay, let me start at one step prior to that. Do I believe in God? Does the concept of God make sense to me? And intuitively, it just kind of did, because I looked around my world and my life. I'm like, everything that I see, whether it be something from, you know, canned food to, a skyscraper, has a creator. There's nothing that I see that isn't created by something, right? So then when I think about the world, obviously I can think about like the ocean, right? I know that humans didn't create that, but I'm like, if everything that I know that's a part of my life, like if I see that it's all created by humans, when I think about the world, it doesn't really make sense to me that there wouldn't be any intelligent design behind that. Especially, again, this is more in retrospect, but especially if you begin to see the harmony of, like, all the different ecosystems in our environment having to work together to make life stable, but then also just the incredible, I mean, to put any words to it almost does it an injustice, because it's almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around. But the likelihood that the earth, which is in the Goldilocks zone, which is pretty much just means that it's the perfect distance from a sun to be uh um habitable. And it's like, if the earth was, whatever, 5 feet this way, 5 feet that way, is probably not that small. But you get my point. If the earth was just a little bit further away or a little bit closer to the sun, it wouldn't be habitable, and therefore there would be no life on earth. And just the infinitesimally small chances that, if you were to simulate the Big Bang a billion different times, a trillion different times, in all likelihood, you would never get the Earth falling in Goldilocks zone. So I'm like, already, just take God out of it. Just the fact that randomness all happened, so like we beat the almost virtually impossible odds. So there's life on Earth. I'm like, nah, that doesn't really make sense to me, and I'm more kind of in belief of intelligent design. So I was cool and okay with the concept of God. Now, let's get to my religion. So, one of the main things about my religion that even allowed for this process to take place was the concept of independent investigation of the truth. And that's this principle in the Baha'i faith that you're not supposed to be a Baha'i because my mom was a Baha'i or I grew up in a Baha'i environment. I'm supposed to be a Baha'i because I have read the writings, I've read the principles of the faith, and I accept it to be true for me. Because Baha'is believe it's an integral growth. It's integral to the growth and maturation of each individual soul to come to know God for themselves and to come to know spiritual reality for themselves. So the Baha'i faith actually encourages Baha'is when they're beginning to investigate the faith to not just read the Baha'i writings, but to read all of the major world religions, to read the Bible, to read the Torah, to read the Quran, to read the Bhagavad Gita. Did I say that right? I probably butchered that. I'm going to embarrass myself in the podcast, but you get my point. The Holy Book of Buddhism. So, or is it Hinduism? Look, I'm embarrassing myself. It's one of the two. But anyways, my point is to read all the different holy scriptures and then decide, like, okay, like, does this all make sense for you? And pretty much come to a conclusion on your own. So I did that. I didn't just read Baha'i writings. I read writings again from all the major world religions. And, I went to church. I mean, my mom's the only Baha'i in my family. She became a Baha'i like 2 years before I was born. So most of my extended family is Christian. So it's not hard to like go to church. I visited, I went to mosque. I went to temples. I'm not going to say I immersed myself, but I did enough to get a general idea about the teachings of other religions. And the thing that made me accept what the Baha'i faith proclaimed, the thing that made me accept the Baha'i teachings and for that to be true is that it was the most encompassing and it wasn't divisive in the sense that one of the main teachings of the Baha'i faith is progressive revelation. And that's that all the major world religions aren't these separate, disparate entities with no connection or correlation to each other whatsoever. And it's not that what Muhammad said was right, but what Jesus said was wrong, or what Jesus said was right and what Buddha said was wrong. It's that all of these major world religions were right and they came to teach humanity according to the time and place. And we believe in progressive revelation because we believe, and like just like individuals grow and mature over time, we believe that society grows and matures over time. So just like, let's say you're 5 or 6 years old and you're in math class, right? And you're learning your ABCs or you're learning your basic addition and subtraction. Your teacher is teaching you at your capacity, right? It's not that they're teaching you anything wrong. They're just teaching you at your capacity. But then let's say fast forward into 12th grade or your freshman year of college or whatever. And let's say you're in advanced calculus. It's not that your advanced calculus teacher is right and your kindergarten teacher is wrong. They're just teaching you according to your capacity and what you could understand at the time. Likewise, we believe that society as a collective grows and matures over time, and such manifestations or prophets, whatever word you want to use, of God are sit down to teach humanity for what they need at that time and place. So to me, that made a lot of sense, and not from like a kumbaya, let's make this all make sense type of thing, but like actually it made sense from an objective perspective of thinking like, okay, yeah, because if you pay attention, it seems like a lot of these religions are saying the same thing, maybe just in slightly different words. And yeah, they may differ on some of their social teachings, but it may make sense that they differ in some of their social teachings if they were spread out between time and space. Yeah, some of the things may differ. And the fact that as humanity grows, we get smarter and we may need new teachings to help guide us that are appropriate for that day and age. That all makes sense to me. So the concept of progressive revelation, I think, is what really made me accept the Baha'i faith to be true. And then through my further and further investigation of the faith, because the Baha'i faith, and I'll say this because I realize I've been taking a long behind time, the Baha'i faith has a lot of writings. The revelation is vast. We have what you can consider like a holy book, like we have our version of the Bible or the Quran, but we don't just have that. We have a myriad of writings that were written by the manifestation of God, the prophet of our faith, whose name is Baha'u'llah, he wrote that in his own pen, and a lot of what he wrote was written on his own pen, or he was revealing the word and it was being transcribed to him by his amanuensis, and then he would approve it and say, okay, that's good. So that was another big thing to me, the fact that it was like recent history, because the Baha'i faith started in the early to mid 19th century. I'm like that, and in the context of history, that's like yesterday, So the fact that I can actually, there's history books and where the central figures of the Baha'i faith, are talked about, and like there's no, I mean, I believe that Jesus did exist, right? But a lot of people say like, oh, how do we know that even Jesus exists or some of these manifestations exist? Like, there's no question about, the Baha'i faith, whether or not the founders existed, or if they did or did not say these things. All this is like recorded history, and it was kind of good for me because I didn't have to question the validity of the religion itself. I just had to question the validity of what it was claiming. So I'm done with my long behind rant. But that's kind of my intellectual journey and how I came to accept the Baha'i faith to be true. And yeah, I guess that's it for me. So I'm gonna pass the rock over to Jason.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of the offerings that you shared, Armand, I think real rich, and perhaps concepts, really deep concepts. Maybe some of the listeners might be the first time hearing about it. So I think I appreciate how you shared it.
I butchered a
And
few
also,
words through there, but I think I just have this. I have like fatigue from doing this episode for like the third time.
sure. Yeah, dog, I get you. And also, like, I think one of the highlights, independent investigation, is case in point, regardless of what you hear on the 206 about Baha'i faith or about any ideas we share, always independently investigate. I think if you're a listener, I think that blessing that you have as a person who can decide for oneself, look at the facts, be fair minded about it, and decide for yourself what you think and believe. And I like how you approach it with the rational, intellectual approach, and Tim sharing some of the community and family approach. And I could touch on those, but maybe I'll touch on, for me, in my process of spirituality, the mystical approach. So a lot I could say about growing up a certain way. I'm from California. My parents are more or less self-proclaimed hippies in the positive way that a hippie might self-identify. That may not be positive in a lot of context, and historically speaking, there's lots of things that could be said about that. But in a more generic California, trying to be a positive person in society and recognizing the human being, my folks are like that. So we were raised like that. When my folks found the Baha'i faith in their early 20s, so when my brothers and I were born, we were raised within the tenets of some of the teachings of the Baha'i faith as best my parents could practice them and share them with us. And we lived in a suburb of Sacramento, California, and kind of navigated life much like any other kid in those parts. And our faith was, other than it influencing Christmas, I remember that, like growing up, I remember Christmas being influenced because we didn't get presents on Christmas like other kids did. Well, my extended family, on occasion, we would all rendezvous together. And when we were really young, we would get gifts from extended family. But as we got older, I think just those things in our family just went away anyways. But in the Baha'i community and in the Baha'i teachings, there are other days of gift giving and celebratory times, of which my parents introduced us to that. And in those days happened in February and March, and were very different than Christmas time. But all that being said, we still enjoyed such dynamics of, this idea of getting gifts. Honestly, the commercialization of the Ayamiha, even, that's, as a child, that's how I was just looking forward to getting something. It wasn't about faith, and it wasn't
It's just
about
a typical
religion.
guy always trying to get some.
Well, it was a kid, as children, we were just thinking, about fairness, and we say, oh, why are these kids having access to this stuff? How come I don't get that on Christmas Day? And, parents are trying to teach us, well, we celebrate a different time for gift giving. And so they're teaching us about that at the same time. They're trying to uh, evolve our perspectives. And so, other than that, though, as a child, I don't recall many profound impacts, that is, like traditions or customs. And then in time later, come to realize, because in the Baha'i community, there are no traditions and customs per se. That is, in regards how people behave. There might be in regards how people worship, or how people go about, looking and studying at the writings or something like that. But as far as what the particular expression looks like, it might look very different per family. And so in our way, we were who we were as people. And my folks were very much into other sort of paths they have experienced, and were looking at different, not only religions, but just philosophies and ways of being, ways of moving through the world, that not only make sense, have rationale, also maybe give some deeper sense of the life we're living. And for me, when I say the path of mysticism, to me, the mystical path is the seeking path. And there's always a desire to find out more, to go deeper. And for me, I would say my first experience with going deep was with sports, and in particular, the game of basketball. And I remember entering into certain states within the game of basketball that I now would call something like a flow state, would be a contemporary term. At some points, I might call it like being in the zone. In any case, it was this state of really being at one with the game of basketball. That's the way I looked at it. I felt like the game and I were at one, and there was a feeling of control over the
right
game.
there.
Yeah, and it was like this mode of, in the way that we played, in the dedication I had for the game. I played at as a high school athlete, and we really cared about this. This meant a lot to us, so we sacrificed a lot for it. We committed ourselves to it. So I remember learning about the idea of going deep and going deeper in commitment, and recognizing that there was really, maybe I could never do enough. I always had to be on. I always had to be ready. So sport taught me that. And when there came a point in my early, kind of like, I think I was maybe 18 years old, where something happened to me. It helped me realize, without getting into the details of that experience, although the details of that experience will be, I'd be happy to share them. In short, what I can say was, it helped me realize that me, myself, and life, that there were deeper aspects to life and myself, more than just with sport. Because for me, really, I identified as this athlete, and my consciousness was somewhat, I would say, wrapped in that, so it would be limited. So when I had this experience, it was an experience that really kind of flooded over my consciousness. One might call it like, an analogy could be like, as if it's a sunny day in your mind, and then all of a sudden a storm comes in, and then you get drenched from this downpour, and then the sun breaks again. So what happened in that storm was, for me, like as if my consciousness was being kind of cleansed, being washed. And it helped me see beyond just my limited experience, kind of like you're sharing, Armand, recognizing that life was bigger than just my sport and the way I played it, and my family and my neighborhood and my community, and beyond and beyond. It became clear to me I was part of a larger sort of, what I would say today is like a fabric, a tapestry. I'm a thread in a rug, if you will, playing a part, but somewhat insignificant, to say the least. And when that hit me, it sparked the curiosity to what does that mean. That moment, I really felt connected to my surroundings, the people I was with, the environment I was in. Everything from the grass and the tree to almost just the space in the air, the feeling of breathing, the connection to the body.
You're channeling
Amazing stuff.
your inner hippie there that you got from your parents.
Yeah, it could be considered very hippie, being from California and all that. And in that moment, though, it transcended any sort of label. I was really in a space of what I felt was connection to life as a truth. Life as truth. I was connected to that. Life takes on many facets, many examples. Somehow I was dialed into all of it. It felt like, and it was really euphoric. The feeling was really profound, to say the least. And it lasted for a while. I would say well over the course of a day and into days even. In any case, I would say that was the beginning of like a sense or a feeling of investigation, of seekership, of learning, a desire for that. So that particular feeling has taken me to many places all over the world, has taken me to many books and many teachers to learn about the various mystical paths. And there's many all over, many walks of life, and in every society that I've explored, in every community and history that I've read, there's folks who walk the mystical path, and it looks unique to each society as well. And in some societies, it was highly acclaimed and revered. In other societies, it was considered something revile, and individuals were even killed for going down the road of the mystical path. So for me, being in the United States of America and having some liberties and freedoms from a variety of reasons, I'm a white person, and I'm a man, so that afford me a certain comfort in traveling, as well as a certain maybe feeling that I was going to learn something, and then couple that with the somewhat consciousness my parents provided, and a certain genuine openness I have to people. I was able to kind of experience a lot of different things and meet a lot of fantastic and wonderful folks who were also walking the mystical path. And I'll kind of sum it up and say, although there's many stories there, one in particular, when I was in India, and learning that at a certain point it was common to be known as a seeker in India. It was common to be aware of mystical reality. And maybe it didn't mean that we were all practitioners of that and we moved in those ways, but we were aware of it. It didn't scare us. It wasn't hearsay or superstition. It was just an accepted part of how things were. So I say that, and also to say now, of course, with imperialism, if you will, or colonization as it stands across the globe, lots of shifts, and then also that there's been some sharing of a universal, and some universal acceptance of certain things. It may change in the future, but as it stands right now, so even in India, there's Western dynamics fully present, of course. Yet and still, without those in place, there was not some learning that I had from it. So, and then when I come back, meaning to say English, right? I learned in the English language. I didn't study in Sanskrit, or I don't speak Hindi. I learned some Hindi the time I was there out of necessity, but beyond that, I wasn't immersing myself in the culture. So I'm saying all of this to say, some of the mystical path is looking very different, I think, in the modern sense, and at least for me, and in the West. And it's something that I don't hear Westerners speak on too much. However, there are mystics here in the West, and they're living in a certain way and experiencing life and trying
commercial
things.
mysticism.
Yeah. Well, in real talk, absolutely. And and that's something to take into consideration when we consider the seeker's path, because what it looks like in the United States of America and what it looks like in a certain part of India, say where I was at Rishikesh, India, although there's quite unique things, there's also similarities. And when it comes to monetization or commercialization, um, it may not be the necessary tool, and it may not be a tool we use in the future, that is the money tool, as much as we do now. But right now, it's very much one. And it's okay to utilize it the way we utilize it. Now, what it means in regards, commercialism or capitalism, and then when we say mysticism, again, it's, to me, it's part of the fabric of life. Now, how it plays itself out, these are conversations down the road, perhaps in the future, and community by community and person by person will have to navigate it. So, all that to be said, going back, finalize the thoughts here on my personal spiritual journey, and I didn't say much about the Baha'i faith at all with this on purpose, except that one of the foundational kinds of things that drew me to the faith in particular was some of the mystical writings, because there are writings considered to be of mystic character written for those who were interested in that. So in our faith, like you shared, Armand, it's wonderful because there's so many writings for us
Everyone.
to study.
Practical,
and it will
mystical.
resonate for sure with some of it. Like, if you had the political edge, you could find something you're looking for. Definitely the humanitarian edge is always there. And whatever contemporary term we also want to use, we can find aspects within the writings that would address it. And so for me, that I find that profoundly deep when we think about mysticism, again, going deeper. The fact in our faith that there's so many writings to go deeper and deeper on is something I'm very grateful for. And also in the writings, the encouragement of investigation is also highly, to me, it resonates deeply for me in the life. And it also speaks that there's always possibilities. It's not a finite thing. That I feel like part of our faith is a living reality that we have to grow with and adapt with and change with. So that's another facet of mysticism. I think speaks to that. It naturally we seek the mystical path as one seeking of truth. So I think naturally, if we're truth seekers, we become we understand more and more as we continue to develop the skills and the attitudes necessary to become, say, dialed into certain aspects of truth. So anyway, one thought to kind of bridge these two is this idea of when East and West meet, right? When the intellectualism of the West and the sort of spiritual mysticism, again, it requires like a whole new learning. It's not something to be identified as mind and body and emotion. It has a unique character to it. But when those unique characters come together, I could imagine some really profound, hopefully profound progress for the human community, human race. So my sense is until we actually evolve, we won't see it. So it's not something that's necessarily going to be exploited. My sense is that it's something we graduate to as a community, as a collective. And these are just my musings anyway. But I think some of these things we don't evolve to a level of potential if we're not ready for it. I think just like you mentioned the grades, we don't move on to new levels of math if we're not ready. We can stick around and really learn before we move on. So we got a lot of learning to do. It seems to me I got a lot of learning, most definitely. And so I'm always constantly investigating and seeking after the truth of life. So I'll leave it at that.
Quick correction for myself before we transition into a new topic in this spirituality and religion episode. When I was struggling back, when I was rambling in the beginning, giving my my spiritual journey, the Bhagavad Gita is from Hinduism, not Buddhism. I was like confused at the time, and I'm remembering properly now. It's from Hinduism. But hey, Mister Expert. Now I'm not saying expert because you went there, but I should have threw me a lifeline there. But
bro. But you know what? All right, here I'll give one to our listeners here. I could have, and at the same time, it doesn't matter. It is you weren't trying to be disrespectful. I understood that. I wasn't wanting to jump in on your sentence. Just, I mean, you know what I mean. You corrected yourself. You needed. That's good. You know. So, yeah.
But true that. So I know that, I mean, since we've done this episode, this is like the third or fourth time now, we talked about some of the things we know we want to include in it. And I know that one of those things was talking about Western society, particularly the United States, but you can think about Western society in general and our collective attitude towards religion as a whole, and why, particularly amongst the younger generation, you see a lot of people who are, at the least, disillusioned with the concept of organized religion, and many young people referring to themselves as being spiritual and not necessarily religious, and why we think that is. And maybe, since we haven't heard from Mr. Zero Dark 30 in a long time, he could lead us off.
Well, I appreciate the pass there. I won't say I liked a lot of the analogies that both you and Jason used in your articulation in reference to your spiritual journeys. You know, that space one was my favorite. The Goldilocks zone. Yeah, I haven't heard that one talked about in a while. Had me rolling. And I think the whole, the hippie identity of Jason's parents, I thought that was juicy. But it's crazy how a lot of our individual spiritual journeys start out, how it develops, how it evolves, and where it leads us to today. I never get tired of that. As it relates to Western society, especially as it relates to our younger generations, as far as religion, spirituality, church, maybe a lot of them identifying as, just spiritual. It's such a mix mash. It's such a cauldron of a lot of factors that has its hand into what I like to reference as the secularization of society. And, a lot of just our societal norms as it relates to, oh man, like the hustle bustle of every day, the misinformation, surrounding media, and what other forms of just mass media we're into, from the technology we use, from the negative short change effects on our communication between each other, interpersonal relationships, I think has a role into kind of like negatively influence or taking away from the importance that church used to have in society back in the day. A lot of people are putting their faith in a lot of materialism. There's also just a lot of individualism and other facets as far as American values are concerned. Meritocracy, romanticism, that's each having its like little card to play in regards to people's quote unquote spiritual paths and attitudes and understandings of religion. When September 11th happened, it was a major event, but it had a huge impact on people's attitude towards, um, a lot of religion as it relates to the Middle East. A lot of misconceptions, a lot of hate drawn towards them. And, maybe at one time where many people were very open, to learning more about the world, especially as it relates to the many faiths, now it has been kind of like damaged, by a lot of the fear and hate mongering surrounding major tragedies like that. I think during World War II, you know, A lot of um, and don't quote me on this. I think a lot of Asian people were put into internment camps because of the attack
Japanese
on the
in Pearl Harbor.
Japanese. Yeah, thank you. Because of their attack on Pearl Harbor, you know, they're relocated. It's located, just isolated, but you know, culture and related religions, they can be impacted by these things, and I just feel like, I guess, the collection of events that has happened, especially in the 20th century, in combination with the rise of technology and how it's affected our social lives, I just think in general is having a huge impact. But I will outline that, you know, amongst all of the happenings and unfoldings in our world up to this point, as it relates to people's understandings and attitudes towards many faiths out there, there has been a lot of good things that religion and faith and church has brought to humanity, being the center of our lives, as it relates to, cohesion, having a place where um, gatherings where people can meet, if the family situation back at home is bad, these centers of spiritual gatherings and learnings has been essentially the social backbone of a lot of members of society, finding brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers where, they never knew any. Um, these places has been a second chance to many people in life, where they've gone through lots of misery and hopelessness. Um, it's taught a lot of things that maybe you really didn't pick up anywhere else in your life, as far as like norms, like respecting your parents, you know, not committing adultery when it comes to murder and theft. There's just things that, you can learn and pick up, I guess, through people of faiths and um, just through these places of spiritual growth. I want to say too that it also has served to giving people a deep, great sense of purpose, where a lot of people felt lost beforehand. We say a lot of times offhandedly that, oh, yeah, having a job, gives you structure, gives you purpose. You know, church, my grandmother used to say, what I'm saying, it is like the wellspring of giving you purpose and seeing things that are higher than yourselves, kind of breaking the hold that um, secularism has on all of us, where we just really see our problems, really small and petty, as just the center of the universe, and just dissolving that and being able to just relate to everyone and see a higher purpose, see greater meaning in ourselves, and not get caught in this back and forth bickering and stuff. But I think that's just a broad personal outlook of mine as it relates to that. It's interesting statement.
No doubt. And Southwest J,
Yeah,
you got
yeah.
any thoughts on the subject?
Oh, yeah, I like a lot what you shared, Tim, too, and I relate to that. It's kind of the way I see it as well. Religion really is, man. When you think about any civilization advancing, religion was a part of it, and arguably, if we are fair about it, and not that we are all historians or that we know yet, it seems that history shows that religion has uh, created a lot of positive shifts for society. And, just like Tim was sharing, social backbone in a lot of ways, it's a support structure and system for so many people across the globe at different times. And it's not to say that it's without its challenges, as we well know. And to speak briefly on some of those challenges, I think some of the youth can witness, and we all can witness some of the hypocrisy of believers. People who believe in a certain thing, who are trying to maybe even share that with others, and then maybe even suggest it as a way to live, and then their behavior is such that it's opposite from what they're saying. So I think this happens quite a bit. And I think when we talk about the war of religion, when we talk about religion being used as a weapon against people for political gain or economic gain, for control, it's happened throughout history, and it's one of the true tragedies of the human being how do you say, anti-human. It's really a human being kind of sickness, I think, toward fellow people, and we've seen that play out for many years as well. And we've seen that there isn't any group of people without their challenges, without their shortcomings. And my sense is what we're seeing with the young is that less and less willingness to accept at least a certain dogma, and the dogma being almost like the adult way, folks saying, do as I say, not as I do. Some of that kind of energy, right? Like, my sense is it's a lot of some facet of organized religion in the West, some facet of it. It's not characterizing the entirety of it, but some facet of it is this kind of do as I say, not as I do reality. And we need actually people to be examples, I think. So before we start being holier than thou and saying, well, since you can't do it, here's your punishment, which doesn't seem fair in any case, especially because it doesn't seem anyone's doing it. It doesn't seem anyone's walking the walk, if you will. It seems a lot of folks are making efforts. It's beautiful to see. It's fantastic and can be acknowledged. And perhaps there are many, maybe souls who are walking the walk, and maybe I just don't see them, or I'm too unreceptive. Maybe I can't perceive that. But my sense at the same time is one that is, how do we kind of, recognize the shortcomings, and then also how do we recognize the beauty? How do we carry forward with what's beautiful and helpful and healthy? And how do we transform what's no longer serving us? So my sense is young folks are in recognition of that there's a need for transformation, and it's going to look many different ways. So it might look like moving away from certain facets of organized religion, or maybe even like our parents' religion. I think it's common to kind of move away from what people showed you. And at the same time, I think there's a wide enough invitation for investigating spirituality or investigating aspects of religion in a way that would be healthy or safe for individuals as they so do it. At least here in the West, in the United States of America, my sense is that there's a little more freedom to do that. Again, in other parts of the world might be very different, and they may have to go about it in so many other ways. So for us here in the West, for some of us who can speak out and speak up, my sense is I hope more and more people do that in regards transformation and for the betterment of the community. So if it's leading to that, I think, I look forward to seeing what else will happen. And who knows, man, when people really come together, what kind of transformation can happen. And my sense is religion can hold space for all of it. No, there is no need to throw away things. There's a lot of beautiful things still. They could have ancient elements that are timeless, and they could have some things that, they may not be so helpful anymore. So anyway, I think each community can decide what that looks like for them. And I have no personal views on what religion should do with itself and who makes those choices. I'm in no position, nor would I want to be, to make such choices. However, as just a human being, I would say, reiterating my hope and my prayer is that we find a way to do it together and recognize there's space for everyone. There's enough for everyone. And it's not about convincing other people, that I'm right or you're right. It's really just about listening and sharing. And if we're deciding to do it as a community, we'll make choices that work for the community. And Yeah, so those are a few thoughts I got on it. Armand, I don't know. What do you got to say about it?
I have a lot of thoughts, as usual, but I'm not trying to wax on like I did at the beginning of the episode. So I'll just say a few things that come to mind. One is just an observation more than, it's an observation more than anything else. And it's just something that I find interesting is that I think that the younger generation justifiably has some qualms with religion. And like I said, they feel disillusioned with the concept of organized religion, and rightfully so. I mean, I think, plugging the Baha'i faith here again, the wisdom behind progressive revelation is that religion needs to evolve and mature just like everything else in life. And that if it doesn't, it could become problematic. So I'll leave that because I don't want to go in too much of a tangent if I was to get deep into what I just said, but I'll just leave it at that. So I think there's some objectively correct, if you will, qualms with some objectively correct qualms that the younger generation has with organized religion today. But that also being said, one of the things I think that a lot of people may overlook is not realizing, again, you guys both mentioned it, the positive things that religion has brought to society that they might not even realize is from religion. And to me, I personally don't see there being a difference between religion and spirituality. To me, you only get the concept of spirituality from religion. Like, you can't separate the two from my perspective. And even I think that no matter what if people say, I don't have a religion, trust me, everybody has a religion, because even if you don't subscribe to any organized religion and you say you're just spiritual, you are following the laws, the regulations, the ideas of someone or something, whether you're aware of it or not. And in that sense, what I mean is, you have a religion is that you have an ideology that you subscribe to, whether consciously or not. And in that sense, I'm saying you have a religion, as in you have a higher something that's beyond you, something something else dictating or influencing your life to the degree in which it has major influences and effect on you. But kind of backtracking to about how the effect of religion has had even very basic and fundamental thing that even the most irreligious person out there would agree to, such as, like, again, unless you're, a sociopath, most people believe in, like, not killing, right? And you don't necessarily have to be a sociopath to kill someone, but most people agree. I think even some people who have killed people before, most people agree that killing is morally wrong, right? That's not just because we as a society came together and said, yeah, that's from religion, the Ten Commandments. Most people believe that, taking what's not yours is wrong. Again, whether we adhere to it or not, most people agree that that is morally wrong. Again, that comes from religion. So there are a lot of things, big and small, that actually do have its roots in religion that only people are necessarily aware of or consciously are thinking of when they say they kind of don't really subscribe to religion. Because, again, rightfully so, they're kind of looking at some of the other things and some of the other way that religion is manifesting itself today in today's world, and some of the negative things, some of the negative influences they may have, and they want to distance themselves from that, so they kind of, as a whole, throw the whole thing away. But I just think that it's interesting that at the same time, most of us are unaware of really some of the foundational cornerstones in regard to moral and ethical behavior and concepts of society and living together as communities come from religion. So that's the one of the major observations I had. There was something else that Tim said or you said. I can't remember, but I'm blanking at the moment. So if one of you guys want to hop in and save me, I'm really mentally fatigued when it comes to this conversation. Like,
Well, no, you done brought up, brought up a good point. A lot of us, aren't aware, of just how much of an impact, spirituality and religion, has on society. There wouldn't be any Star Wars, without religion. George Lucas created, you know, this universe based on heavy elements, um, from a handful of religions. Martin Luther King, he's a Baptist. Without religion, without that spirituality, um, there wouldn't be a civil rights act, that would have passed. You know what I'm saying? These it's a drive. It's a source of strength, conviction. I can tell you that there's records, of slaves discreetly um, doing different things to practice um, their own ways, their own, spirituality that they had brought to the America. And church on the plantation, for as little time as they could exercise it, was like one of the rare moments that, they could be their own and act their own and think their own and worship in the way they want to worship. The abolitionists, the Quakers, what I'm saying, the Constitution, what I'm saying, it's everywhere. We wouldn't be here without its influence, big and small, throughout human history.
And it's funny because I agree with everything you're saying, but that's kind of to my point, is that everything that you brought up is also, like, for example, the most recent thing, the Constitution, right? It's like, yeah, okay, the Constitution had its roots in religion. All men are created equal, but the hypocrisy, as Jason was mentioning before, it's like, but we're not acting like that. So I think that's the rub, is that young people kind of struggle to reconcile what they see, which I'm sure they consciously do recognize some of the good and the benefits and positives and the good and positive influences that religion brings, but some of the negative stuff, oftentimes when they see it being practiced in a hypocritical way. And I think there's a lot of people that I know in literally every religion, from Baha'i faith to Judaism to Buddhism to Hinduism to Islam. I see a lot of times I have conversations with people. I'm like, oh, so like, they'll tell me, hey, Arman, I don't really believe anymore. I don't really practice. And I'm like, oh, like, why not? And you'll see this so many times. It's almost like Maslow hierarchy of needs, and people really need that sense of community. It's when the community is not acting in a way that is in harmony with the teachings of the faith, people lose their faith in the faith. No, they lose their faith in the religion, right? In the teachings. And it's always been very curious to me, because I get it on one hand, like, of course, if you're a part of a religious community, you want that religious community to be adhering to the principles and the tenets of that religion. And if people aren't, especially if they're acting in direct opposition to it, it's hard. And you don't necessarily want to be there, because it's like, what's the point if we're all going to be contradicting ourselves? Yeah, and still, I think ultimately, for me at least, I'm a Baha'i because I believe in what the writings say. I'm not a Baha'i because Jason's a Baha'i, or any of my other friends are a Baha'i. My mom's a Baha'i. And I can't predicate my own belief or participation to a degree in my religion on the fallibility of its constituents. So, I can't be like, oh, if these people who adhere to this religion, my fellow believers, if they're not going to really behave in a way that, is suitable to me, or if there's any conflict, then I don't really believe anymore, And again, I understand it, because, there's been times where I wanted to, it doesn't matter. I think there's times where we all want to distance ourselves from there's friends, family, whatever, right? And I'm sure every person who is active in their religion, there's been times they wanted to distance themselves from it, maybe because of some of the things that are happening in the community. So I get it, but I think that ultimately we are whatever we say are, because we believe in the word. And I say that too because, I'm almost to play devil's advocate against myself and the point that I'm making. There is a quote though in the Baha'i faith that says, if religion ever becomes the point of, and I might not be saying this all the way correct, but I'm saying this the gist of it. If religion ever becomes the point of contention, and the point of contention, animosity, and strife, it's best to do away with the religion altogether. And I think that kind of speaks to the wisdom again behind progressive revelation. I'm gonna keep circling back to it because clearly that's a big deal for me. So yeah, I cut you off, Tim, and I cut you off because I had that to say.
No, yeah, you made some points I wanted to put some emphasis on. But yeah, I know we may be wanting to wrap it up soon here. Callie, do you have anything more to add?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Mainly, I think in life, and hopefully, we're learning to expand our awareness and consciousness as we grow and as we mature in our thinking and feeling. We'll see the nuances and the various levels that influence every aspect of life, how they're unique and how they interact and engage each other, how they're at times very still and other times very dynamic. And, so my sense is uh, it's wise, I think, as a human being in a world today to take things um, to go deeper and to try to understand things. There's not only do we have say misinformation, more importantly, we have access to information that
Preach.
really is we've never had before, and it's worth recognizing that when we're ready, we can decide what we want to learn, and we can go about learning something new, anything at all. Whether we're talking religion right now, we could be a skill. It can be, a language of some kind of so many things we can go about trying. So my hope is that this episode has provided a little bit of uh, thought on, how do I engage my spirituality? Ha- is it conscious? Is it familial? Is it tradition? Is it my community and society? Is it, the movies and the entertainments that have influenced me? Whatever it is, how do I engage my spirituality? I, I imagine a society that has engaged its spirituality in some capacity is a society moving toward more consciousness. Again, I'm not saying it just as seamless and we all get along and it works out just like that. It might. What I am saying though is to go about the spiritual path in some way is to me it seems part of where our society is turning toward. We're looking for answers for things. We're searching outer space. We're consuming at a rate that history has never seen. It's not satisfying the pit within the stomach. We're not getting it. We're all the things we're trying. So my take is spirituality is what's going to satisfy that thirst, and I don't know what that looks like per person. So I just want to encourage just some process of seeking that, and yeah, look forward to a society more inclined toward spiritual matters as well as the material matters.
No doubt. Yo, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I feel like I'm going to the bench. I feel like I played this game, aka did this episode injured, and I'm lipping over to the bench. So one of y'all go ahead and close this out.
Well, 206 wants to give his thanks again for everyone listening. Um, as always, we hope through our honesty, openness, and authenticity, we can pull you in into our personal lives as it surrounds the topics we talk about, um, and offer a different insight, or an outlook or a perspective on the topics we end up talking about. So, yeah, as it relates to spiritual journeys, you know, I hope that everyone in their lifetime finds some time to express themselves as it relates to your own spiritual journey. Um, that would be a beautiful thing, in my opinion. But
No, I'm back.
but
I can't understand. I'm back. I don't know what's wrong with me today, dog. I don't know what's wrong with me.
yeah, I guess.
I'm back. I don't like the bench, bro. I don't like the way it looks, bro. I'm too used to starting. So, oh my god, yo. So Tim gave his final thoughts. Jason, you have any final thoughts?
Well, no, I don't know if Tim was finished.
Uh, hey, go
Oh
ahead.
no, I was done. I think me and Jason said our wrap ups. You go ahead and take it away.
I ain't got
There
nothing
you
else to
go.
say. I have spoken. And with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in and listening to this episode. This is like our 4th time recording, so I don't know if you're able to tell, but it is what it is. You'll most likely get this episode. No, you will get this episode. And we're recording, as always, to get more content in. Until next time, peace.
Later, later.